The calm after the earthquake lasted only a few days, just long enough for the villagers of Grayshore to rebuild their spirits, though not their homes. The newborn boy, now known to the village as the miracle child, continued to grow under the watchful eyes of his tiny guardian, the African penguin. Wherever the baby was placed, whether in a makeshift cradle, wrapped in a shawl on his mother's lap, or lying on a blanket under the weak autumn sun, the penguin stayed close, his beady black eyes always scanning, always listening. But peace never lasts long in places where nature has awakened. On the 6th night after the earthquake, the winds changed. The subtle shift in the air went unnoticed by the villagers, who were too busy patching roofs and clearing rubble. But the penguin felt it. A deep, primal instinct brushed through his feathers. He lifted his head, staring toward the distant ocean that bordered Grayshore. The waves had grown strangely loud, roaring, not crashing. The rhythmic sound of the sea had vanished, replaced by a rising, thunderous pulse. By the time the sun disappeared behind the cliffs, Grayshore village had plunged into a heavy darkness. Clouds blotted out the moon, and the air turned icy. A faint tremor hummed beneath the ground, not like the violent shakes from before, but the quiet, sinister vibration of something building far away. The penguin shuffled uneasily, letting out a soft, warning chirp. The baby, wrapped in warm cloth near the fire pit, stirred. His mother gently lifted him, trying to soothe his cries. She turned to fetch more wood, but the penguin suddenly waddled toward the cliff's edge, staring out at the Black Sea. Then they heard it, a sound like a distant, rolling growl, deep, heavy, endless. Some villagers froze in place. Others snatched torches. Several climbed onto rocks for a better view. Across the horizon, something enormous glimmered under the faint starlight. It moved, stretching across the entire length of the ocean like a silver wall. It rose higher and higher, until even the tallest men gasped. It was not a wave. It was a monster of water. A tidal surge, high enough to swallow the entire coastline. The penguin screeched loudly, his instincts screaming in terror. He turned, racing back toward the baby, flapping desperately at the mother's feet. She frowned, confused, until the ground trembled again, this time accompanied by a sound like thunder tearing the sky apart. And then it hit. The ocean roared forward like a charging beast, swallowing the pier, the shoreline, and the first row of houses. Water slammed into the village with explosive force. People screamed. Lanterns shattered. Wood splintered. The tidal wave barreled through the narrow streets, sweeping away carts, tools, and anyone too slow to escape. The baby's mother clutched him tightly, stumbling as icy water crashed through the village. She tried to run uphill, but the force of the wave knocked her to her knees. The baby slipped from her weakened grasp, floating toward the rising current. "No, no! My baby!" she screamed. Before she could reach him, a wooden beam from a collapsed hut smashed into her, sweeping her backward into the flood. The baby boy drifted farther into the storming darkness, wrapped only in his cloth. But he was not alone. The African penguin plunged into the freezing water without hesitation. The tidal wave tossed him violently, but he cut through the water with desperate, frantic strokes. His flippers burned from the cold, but he didn't stop, even when massive debris surged past him, even when the currents pulled him under and spat him out again. He reached the baby's floating cloth and grabbed it firmly with his beak. The wave pulled them both toward the collapsing edge of the village, toward the cliffs where the water thundered against jagged rocks below. The drop was deadly. The penguin flapped, struggling to steer them away, but the current was too strong. Then, a miracle. A broken fishing boat, slammed loose by the wave, drifted into their path. The penguin rammed into its side, pushing the baby's cloth into a small pocket between two shattered planks. With the last of his strength, he hauled himself into the damaged vessel. The boat rocked violently as the tidal surge carried it away from the village, into the flooded marshlands beyond. Hours passed. The storm raged. The boat drifted into the dark wetlands at the edge of the British coastline, an eerie stretch of muddy water, abandoned fishing huts, and crooked reeds whispering in the wind. Fog curled thick around them like ghostly fingers. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified in the cold. The baby whimpered softly. The penguin pressed close, shielding him with his feathered body to keep him warm. Somewhere in the distance, the cries of night birds echoed through the marsh. The tide had swallowed much of Grayshore, leaving only scattered lanterns floating across the flood like dying stars. By dawn, the storm had weakened, but the danger had not. The drifting boat had grounded itself deep within the marsh, a twisting maze of sinking mud pits, hidden currents, and cold waters that rose and fell unpredictably. No villagers had ventured this far for years. Local legends warned that the wetlands were cursed, haunted by the spirits of sailors lost at sea. The African penguin was exhausted, soaked to the bone, but alive. The baby, wrapped in the wet cloth, whimpered softly. The penguin gently nudged him, offering warmth, protection, and a silent promise. He would not let the baby die here. Even if the marsh was filled with predators stalking the shadows. Even if the rising water threatened to swallow their boat. Even if the night brought dangers far darker than the storm. He would fight. The tidal wave had separated them from the village, but their journey had only just begun. And in the haunted marshlands of North Britain, where fog whispered old curses and shadows moved on their own, a new nightmare waited for them. A nightmare far worse than the earthquake. Far worse than the tidal wave. And far closer than either of them realized.